like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that a flicker rate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
So wheat, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome to Rogue Ways. It is a happy Tuesday in April. Yeah, April. I just did the May tarot reading today. If you want to go check it out, I've made it public on YouTube for anybody to watch. It is just an overview of the month according to the tarot, especially in regards to our economic life, our physical health, our mental and emotional health, our romantic life, our social world, our spiritual selves, and also just a final overview. And May came together in quite the sort of storm of activity. There's a lot of chaos seemingly coming our way, and then there's a lot that we can do about it, and how we can sort of take those energies and use them to our advantage, or at least to a destiny that we like better than the one that some might be planning for us. So that's a fun tarot reading. If you want to go check that out, that was just posted today. It'll be there forever. And yeah, it's quite sunny and warm where I'm at, and it's getting warmer every day. So shit's gonna get summery, and I don't know. If you know me, you know that I don't love the heat. Oppressive heat kind of fucks with me. And here I am in Colorado where it's going to be like 100 and something all the time or whatever. But then it's going to snow too in the middle of that. So anyways, got the babies going in the garden. My little starts are getting bigger and bigger. Got some of them outside in containers already. All kinds of stuff. It's fun time. So let me remind you of some stuff. And I like to remind people that you can go to CoreySharman.com, which is my pen name. It's also rogueways.org. Will take you to the same site. You can read stuff like my most recent hit, Fuck Christianity. And you can check out all kinds of stuff here. I like to point out every once in a while that down here at the bottom, there is this tag collection of different posts and stuff, and it's a fun way to navigate the site if you just want to look into some various aspects and see which posts and stuff are related to there. You can find my Subscribestar from here and check that out, which I'll show you in a second. I didn't actually even mean to go there just now. You can find my published works here. I have 3 books published so far. One more is imminent. Sine Curve is my novel. You can buy it through Amazon, and this is the link to there. If you want to purchase it through Amazon, that's cool. If you'd rather PayPal me directly $15, that cuts out the tax and the shipping that Amazon would otherwise charge you, so it is cheaper for you. You also get an inscription from me and some Rogue Ways stickers thrown in the package, so that is a much better deal for you if you like that. I don't unfortunately offer that with my other books, although they are super fun and awesome. If you want to check them out, there's their links as well. I do offer tarot readings. Someone today said, do more tarot. And I said, well, I do more tarot, but it is personal. It is one-on-one. If you buy a tarot reading, it'd be me and you on Skype or Zoom or the platform of your choice doing a 4 or 10 card reading. You can read a little bit about it here and some reviews and whatnot on the tarot page, but you can purchase that through the shop aspect of the page. On this page you can find all kinds of things, the tarot readings as well as classes that I offer and guidance sessions that are sort of like a coaching session, a one-on-one, just you and I working out whatever you need to work out. That's all here in the classes and tarot section. Logic is happening this summer. We're almost like a month and a half away from Logic. It's really exciting. That's going to be on June 18th, right on the solstice there. The equinox, no, solstice, my bad. The solstice and, God, you guys, why do I always forget the word? An eclipse, good God. An eclipse is happening that weekend too. So it's an eclipse and the solstice, and it's at an eco-shamanic retreat, and it's on the river that is full of ancient magic and all sorts of secret societies that have been fucking with that area, and we're going to explore all of that. It's going to be a pretty rad event. there are tickets left for that for people who are interested. I also sell this Orgonite jewelry that I make, and you can buy Rogue gear as well, t-shirts and mugs and all kinds of things. The Orgonite is here. Again, with the Orgonite, if you want any of these that are still available and you are in contact with me, please just message me directly, because let's cut out the middleman and you can have that straight from me without taxes or anything. So that's the site. That's all the fun stuff on the site. Subscribestar, as I showed you earlier, has 4 different tiers. Each of them have different aspects. The dollar tier is something that anybody can afford. If you are listening right now and you have listened before in the past and enjoyed it, I would love it if you would show your support and your appreciation of the show by doing the Rogue Sprout at least. $1 a month is something I think everyone can afford, and that is really helpful. $7 a month is more like a normal podcast subscription, so since my content is all free, that might be something you're interested in. If you've been listening for many months and you find value and you listen a lot, that would be really cool if you share back with me. And then Rogue Heart at $22 a month is a little bit higher for people who can afford it and feel like they would like to get a tarot reading eventually. This builds up to a tarot reading. So once you're 3 months at this level, you do get a one-on-one tarot reading from me. And then the $55 level, you get a one-on-one tarot reading every month. There's only a few of those because I can only do so many readings a month. I just did one today for my subscriber at that level, and we now we're on our 3rd month, so it's cheaper than buying it from the site each month. You get a $5 discount and you get access to everything at Subscribestar. So I just like to point out those options that you have if you're interested in it. I also have my SoundCloud. This is where the podcast is actually hosted. If you are having trouble getting your podcast app to work with Rogueways, you can always just come here and download or listen to the episodes from here. I have some playlists put together and stuff like that. You can share that freely with whoever you think might enjoy the show. I do want to point out that on the YouTube channel, Rogueways, I do have a subscription level here too. It's very similar to the Subscribestar tiers as far as what you get out of it. And so it's up to you whether you would want to maybe do that through Subscribestar instead. I would prefer it. I think they take less of a cut. Personally, I'm not really sure, but it's available for people who want to support on YouTube and have fun new gifts and whatever stickers and stuff that show that they're a Roguester. So that's available. I also want to point out that I made some new playlists just for simplicity's sake. I put all of season 1 of Rogueways in a playlist, all of season 2, all of season 3 so far. All of our Illuminati Bloodlines shows that we've done, there's only 4. I thought we had done more than that, but we are finally returning this Thursday with the Illuminati Bloodlines. We're going to do Rockefeller, so that'll be a big one. We've been apparently waiting for like a year to do this. we all just kind of forgot we were doing that. So we're coming back with the Illuminati Bloodlines episode this Thursday. It's going to be awesome. People really enjoy the Illuminati Bloodlines shows. We basically pick a family and just go through all of the evil, nefarious bullshit that they're involved with. And then I put together all the randoms like this episode you're currently listening to on a playlist as well. Some people really prefer those episodes and like them a lot. So if you just want to listen to those, now you have a playlist. So those are the things that I wanted to tell you. Let's see who is in the chat. We've got, what's up, Raleigh Dangler? Whoop, whoop. We've got Zetetic Astronomy. Hello. Thank you. My episodes have been killing it. I appreciate that. Hopefully this one lives up to the standards. This one is just my sort of pet project that I love. I love logical fallacy and talking about it and pointing it out. So here we go into that. Tracy Twyman, yes, worthy of exploring for sure. And we got some people who are not saying hello yet. Come say hi in YouTube. If you are on Facebook, I won't see you at all until afterwards. And so I prefer it if you go to YouTube, just so we can all talk together and interact, because as always, Facebook doesn't give me the messages. Not only do I not see them live, I also don't see them afterwards often, because Facebook is a piece of shit and they're full of censorship and fuckery. So what's up, Sue Finelli in the chats? Good to see you here. W King, smoke 'em if you got 'em. That's right. So let's go back to some more stuff that I was going to tell you. And let's see if this works. I wanted to show you guys that our friend Dr. Andrew Kaufman is going to be on London Real tomorrow. This is the big time. This is awesome. Super cool that he has sort of skyrocketed to this mainstream, almost pretty mainstream venue. I really, really think it's awesome. So he's going to be on tomorrow. So if everybody wants to tune in, I think that would be cool to show support. That'll be tomorrow at 6 p.m. I think this is probably obviously London time, so I don't know like when we get to see it in the US or whatever, but pretty rad. So check that out. That's cool. And then, oh, I forgot to open it. Let's see if I can just find it really quick. There's a really cool roundtable that's going to happen called Event 202, and that's going to be on Thursday. Nope. Here we go. Event 202. They're going to do this panel discussion Thursday. And I'm not sure exactly what time, but that promises to be a pretty awesome look at this whole set of shenanigans that's going on. A propaganda opposition exercise is awesome. When I first saw this, I thought it was like an actual Event 201, sequel. And I was like, no, why? We're not even done with your first iteration of your bullshit. But it's not. It's a cool opposition to that. So I wanted to draw attention to that for people who are interested in checking that out. There is that. So yeah, check both of those out. Andrew Kaufman is tomorrow, and the Event 202 is on Thursday, and that is cool. I'll say what's up to. Let's see. Dire Straits. What's up, Dire Straits? We've got Steve Mercer in the house. What's up, Steve? We've got Kaufman will be on London Real this Thursday. We've got the ever sexy Digital Apparition. You were just told that starting tomorrow it's state law to wear a mask to shop anywhere. That's an illegal law. That's an unlawful law if that's true. I'm not doing it, period. Like, I'll starve. I will write letters to the stores and tell them that I'm not going to do it. In fact, that's what I was about to show you is this letter here that I've written that you can use if you'd like to. Sorry, I was just catching up with the chat. This is I'm going to share it to the chat right now. Anybody feel free to share this with anyone. You can copy and paste this and use it as you would like. You can replace, any of the wording that you might need to make it fit your scenario better. I sent my first one today, but basically it's just a boycotting of the mask requirement. And it's a letter that I'm sending to any business that I frequent that starts to require a mask. It basically, thanks them for their services and their, whatever products and whatnot. Start off on the good foot, right? It's called the sandwich method. You do good and then negative and then good again. I don't think I ended on a good though, but anyway, this is a half sandwich. This is an open-faced sandwich. And then it just says we can no longer give our money to you in good conscience, and that's because you are supporting a harmful policy over human health, outside of science. It points out that medical journal studies and scientific data show that masks should be worn for the prevention of spread by an infected person. I get that they're saying that anybody could be infected and spreading it, but that's not how masks have been used in the past. If a person is infected, coughing and sneezing openly in a way that would propel matter, that's what the mask is for. It's to catch that. So if you have to go out and you're going to be coughing and sneezing and you're sick, that's when you would wear a mask. Any other time, it doesn't serve any purpose. This is scientifically supported in journal, studies and data. So masks can help to prevent the spread in that way, but requiring otherwise healthy people to wear them actually allows this moist surface near your mouth hole. And that is actually increasing the likelihood that you will be contaminated and become ill. And I point out that this is dangerous. And I say for me and my family, I don't really have a family, but I just say that because, this works for everyone, I think. And I point out in addition to the increased likelihood of contracting the virus, in that way, the masks can also increase the inhalation of carbon monoxide, which is a dangerous poison. We have already seen, everybody's seen the news articles of the, people who crashed their car because they were inhaling their own carbon monoxide waste matter instead of fresh air, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for people in two very significant ways. And I point out that I not only don't want to endanger myself, but I also don't want to encourage others to ignorantly wear their masks in situations that do not scientifically warrant such behavior. And then I just end by saying it's too bad that they're adopting this, this unscientific, unbeneficial mentality, and then I close. So again, you can kind of take whatever of that you want and print them out and hand them out just kind of as they are, like blank, or I put in a specific business name and my specific name. If Costco does this, I'm going to put in my membership number and then also cancel my membership and make sure they understand that I will never ever be a member there again. And I'll do my best to only shop places that don't require it, but I'm not sure that there will be any places to get food where you don't have to wear a mask. So I guess we'll see, but I think the more of us that do this and refuse to wear this mask and pass out letters like this and find ways to sort of politely and, with an open heart and an open mind, resist the sort of cascading, like blatant ignorance that is overtaking everyone in this wave of insanity, I think the better, because then I think more people will see that and start to wonder and think, and this is kind of, this is how we make change. We do what we can, where we can, with what we have. So if you like that letter, use it. If you want to share it on social media or whatever, please do. It's not even, I think, linked to me, or if it is, it doesn't matter. It's just something that people can copy and paste. So that is up to you to do that. Can I show some of my artwork? Joseph, Korea, what's up? It's nice to see you. I don't have artwork. You can see over here some of my boyfriend's artwork that he does. There's just a little corner of it there. And his site is johnnylarson.com. And he also does the music for the intro and the outro. And if you do find his Patreon, which is patreon.com/johnnylarson, no, Johnny Bravado, you can get that song for free. That's at the end of every Rogueways episode. So I can't show you my art because I don't have any. I can show you my Orgonite art, if that's what you're talking about. I've got some of those here. I guess it'd be cool to see it a little bigger, huh? These are actually two that I just sold today. They go together, as you can see, as a little pair. And I have many other pieces, and these are on my site, like I had shown at the beginning of this show, and I think there's a post about it on YouTube as well. That's my kind of art that I do. It's not super arty, it's more crafty. Chad Clemens, what's up? Nice to see you. Got a mini lecture at a convenience store. Yeah, they're crazy. There's people standing at the door handing out masks, and the completely insane aspect of that drives me crazy is that they're going to grab the mask and touch it with their hands and then hand it to you. It's like you're seriously have no logic about what you're doing, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today, logical fallacy and logic. It's sorely lacking in such profoundly terrifying ways. Very simple logic like that is just like passes right over people's heads. It's like no one thinks. And if they do, I think they choose not to act on it because they assume that everyone else is just going to go along with it and they're going to be ostracized or something. But yeah. Your fear is your business. I like that. That's your fear. Walk away. I don't need to change my life and my fashion because of your fears, right? Wearing a mask is absolutely degrading. It makes us non-human. It's like someone pointed out that our facial expressions and our micro sort of gestures and whatever, these things, our nonverbal communication, they say, is what, 80 to 90% or more of our communication as humans. And if you think about sort of a lot of the things we talk about on this show, like our own personal, like, sort of wavelength or our aura, or if we have sort of ESP or other senses, these are, I'm sure, very degraded with the lack of access to that area of the face that holds so much of the expression there. So I'm sure that that's part of it. I'm sure that the social distancing thing is part of it. I'm sure that a lot of the depression that people are feeling is the lack of that. We know that our brains are programmed to respond positively to human interaction and contact, and so if we're being deprived of that, I'm sure that that's part of the depression and the sort of anxiety that's going on. And I'm sure it's part of the reason why they're doing it. I'm sure that they understand that this is further diminishing our health and well-being when we are participating in this sort of degradation. So I also like to point it out every time I think of it, that 6 foot distance might be just enough for you to like be less capable of sending sort of like a telepathic message, or, you know, feeling, or sort of, you know, whatever connection to other people. It might be that at about 6 feet it starts to be less, you know, easy or accessible. So I don't know. I assume shit like that over the ideas that, you know, they're trying to like do something with facial recognition cameras. And the only reason I don't think that's part of this as much is because I already know, and we can all know if we go back and look, you know, articles from years ago where they can recognize people by the way their body moves and their gait. They don't need access to your face to recognize you through a camera. So I think they were already been past the point where they could recognize you besides a mask, whether you're wearing a mask or not, a long time ago. But that's just what I think. I think there's other things going on than that. It's not a bad idea. I think they already tackled that. So, what's up, Chris? Nice to see you. And so, yeah, let's get to the logical fallacies. So this is my favorite resource. This is something that I used in teaching children logical fallacies, and I hope that doesn't make you feel like I'm speaking down to you. The understanding of and application of and discernment of logical fallacies is something that everybody would be constantly practicing. I'm sure there's very few people who are consistently good at it. And so for a lot of adults, for most adults, this would be new content anyways, and for almost all children, I've never had a student yet who even knew what I was talking about when I said logical fallacy. So don't feel like anything about this is talking down to you. It would be very, very normal for you to not have ever even heard the phrase logical fallacy up before tonight. Very few people understand that it exists or what it is. But a lot of these you're actually going to be familiar with. You're going to recognize them. You're going to be like, oh, that shit, yeah, it's bullshit. I see that all the time. So that will also happen. But again, my students, even including students that people had written off as like incapable of learning, were capable of grasping this and dealing with these things, which is really cool. So I think any of us can grasp these things. And this is just a really well put together book. And I love things that take really complex and profound truths and sort of make them into this like accessible, almost childlike presentation, because it belies how much profundity is within these pages for sure. It's just like the Never-Ending Story. You think it's a kid's thing and it's not. And so we're just going to go through some of them until we get bored and quit. But it's a cool book. If you want to go to this, I'll throw this link in the chat as well. Book of Bad Arguments is what it's called. Again, super well done. So they go through, each argument has this little 2-page spread. On the left they have sort of some descriptions and definitions, and on the right they have an example. And I'm actually going to put my face over here because the descriptions get boring towards the end, but the picture is very helpful. So argument from consequences is the first logical fallacy that we will look at. And the global climate change is a perfect example of argument from consequences. A lot of people use argument from consequences when they're talking about global climate change. I also like that up here at the top it tells you the other names for this fallacy. So you may be more familiar with it as the red herring fallacy or as the informal fallacy if you are a studier of logical fallacy. So it's cool that he also did that in the creation of this book. But basically it's the, like they say here, the arguing from consequences is speaking for or against the truth of a statement by appealing to the consequences of accepting or rejecting it. So for example, in the picture over here, we see our little man on his cow, and it says, well, if we all get rid of our cows, then we'll have to walk everywhere, and that would be terrible for morale. Therefore, cow emissions are not killing our planet. And that is a logical fallacy, obviously. It is also true in the case of good consequences. We can't say like, oh, well, you know, if we have a government shutdown, we all get $1,200 to do nothing. So, you know, COVID-19 is a real thing that's killing a bunch of people. That would also be an argument from consequences that would be fallacious. Oh my God, W. King. It's not too long. It's so good. You have lost my happiness. Just joking. But seriously, it's the best book ever. Oh, I get it. It never ends. I don't get jokes very. I'm not very good at getting jokes. That was funny. I just didn't know it. So a lot of times people will appeal to this in an argument in order to sort of get you to agree or disagree with something, and it's manipulative. The whole idea is to get you to think about the consequences and to think like whether you'd like them or not, and therefore, you know, get you to agree with the thing, obviously. But it could be true or not, but what you shouldn't do is take it as a reason to believe the veracity of a claim. And that's the whole idea. It might be true that you get $1,200 to sit on your ass for a month or whatever, but that doesn't mean that there's a reason to have a shutdown, right? That doesn't mean it makes logical sense to stay at home and not work for a month. And that is an argument from consequences. If you guys are looking at these and you have a good example of recently of seeing one of these in the media, which is most of the time that we're going to be trying to look for these, and from idiots on Facebook and whatever, throw it in the chat because that'll be fun to share if you can think of an example of these. We also have the straw man. We're all very familiar with these ones as well. Again, I told you you're going to recognize a bunch of these, and this is one that you're definitely going to recognize. A straw man can also be, oh, I was wrong. There's categories of logical fallacies, and each of these can also be known as red herrings or informal fallacies. They're just broken down further, such as straw man and argument from consequences. And there will be more categories as we go. So straw man is when you intentionally misrepresent something, sort of like a caricature, in order to make something look better or worse than it is. And it's always important to remember that these can be positive or negative, and that both of them are fallacious and both of them should not be used. But that's called using a straw man or the straw man argument. And especially we see it in these examples. If you can see this here, it says misrepresenting, misquoting, or misconstruing. I see this a lot recently with Donald Trump. I want to see something. Yeah, no, we'll just keep it like that. With Donald Trump, especially, the media really is obsessed with misrepresenting, misquoting, and misconstruing, and it has to be intentional that they're doing this many straw mans. It cannot be an accident. Like, everybody is susceptible to making logically fallacious claims and logically fallacious statements and whatever. That we can all do that, and this is part of why it's really good to look at them and think about them and try to see them in yourself and others, is so you can weed them out. But it's going to happen from time to time. Like, it's just things that we do. But especially in the media, you're supposed to have like a sort of standard that you wouldn't do something like that because you realize that it's not news. Exactly like Raleigh just said in the chat, he said to shoot up Lysol. It's a blatant mischaracterization of what he actually said and what he actually did. And they do it all day, every day. And so it becomes really difficult to even sift through, like, is there anything true in this? Like, is there any fucking ounce of truth in this? And it's really sad to see, especially the fucking Lysol one. Because if you go watch what he said was he asked a question. He was like, I don't know, could you shoot up? Or I don't even think he said inject. I think he just said use inside the body. I don't know exactly what he said, but it was clear to me that he was asking a question. And I don't know why anyone would ever be barred from asking a question, or why it would be looked down on to ask a question. Or maybe he should have done it in private, but who cares? He asked a question. If somebody took a question he asked and went and shot up Lysol, like, they probably deserve to die. Like, what an idiot. And then in the following days, they were like, poison control calls have gone up like twice as much, and they literally looked at the same exact day the year before. They didn't even look at like an average of like months, and this is how you can use statistics to be logically fallacious. they didn't even present the statistics accurately. So they just love to do that in the media. They love to do all of these, both sides of the equation. I'm not defending Trump by any, I mean, I am defending Trump literally, but I'm not a Trump person. I'm not like out to defend him. I think he's probably a piece of shit, as I've said many times, as they all are most likely. And, but I see these types of arguments and I'm like, this is what people buy. They look at that and they're like, Trump is such an idiot. And it's like, no, you're the idiot for not verifying for yourself what was actually said and for not seeing through logical fallacies. It's actually your responsibility. It sucks that the media has fallen to such a state of disgrace that they intentionally do these things literally all day long, but it's our job to do better and see through it and present better. So intentionally misquoting, misrepresenting, or misconstruing, including oversimplification. That's another good one to keep in mind. Oversimplification is a straw man too. I will make often a very complex statement or argument, and the person's response will be like, "Oh, so you just want like people to die?" Like, what? Like, no. Oversimplification is another example of straw man fallacy. So there's that one. Yes, we call that natural selection. If somebody wants to shoot up Lysol, then somebody dies. This is an awesome one. We see this a lot lately too. I don't mean to make all of these about COVID, but as soon as I'm seeing them and remembering what they are, I'm like seeing how frequently we're using this in the current media shitstorm of bullshittery. Appeal to irrelevant authority is exactly what it sounds like. You pick somebody who might be an expert on something, and they might be a professional in an area, and then you have them comment on something that has nothing really to do with their work. If it does, it's like loosely related somehow, or they like kind of knew about it because they kind of studied it in school, but like it's not actually like the area they work in. And this happens all of the time. Again, it happens to prop up things that we like, and it happens to tear down things we don't like. And so whether it's being used in the positive or the negative, you still want to call it out because it's still not helpful, it's not clear thinking, and it's not correct. We have all kinds of people. If you turn on any single news or opinion or editorial and of the mainstream especially, and you watch or listen long enough, they're going to have somebody who's presented as a professional but is not necessarily in that area, and they're going to be commenting on shit that they don't really necessarily know about, but they do it with authority, and they do it wearing like a suit or whatever, and they were presented as an authority to you, and so you're like, oh, well, this really smart person said this, and that's exactly what it's meant to do, to make you think that therefore what they present might have more weight or whatever, and it is fallacious to assume that it does. It would be better to ask somebody who is an actual authority in that area. I love that Professor Chimp is the world's most distinguished living chemist, but he's only asked about matters of fidelity. Because that totally matters. It is interesting. Bill Gates, yes, thank you. God, you're so good at this, Brett. Bill Gates is exactly this. God, thank you. Fuck. See, this is what I liked when I taught it too. I'd be like, I'd have my examples in my head and like these things in the book, and then my students would be like, oh, is it like this? And I'd be like, Jesus Christ, you little geniuses. Like, yes, it's exactly like that. So Bill Gates is absolutely an irrelevant authority. He has no background in biochemistry or even vaccine studies or like anything. He's not a doctor at all. He's also not an economist. I don't know why we even talk to Bill Gates, just because he has a lot of money. Should be like the clearest example to us that money rules the world and nothing else. Why does he get to run the world? Nobody knows. I like calling him Billiam. Ooh, we're going to get to that one, W. King. There's a name for that one for sure. Yeah, he's absolutely evil. It's disgusting. Equivocation. I hate it. This happens all the time, and it's so, like, sapping of energy that we have to waste so much time on this. Equivocation is something where you basically change the meaning of the word during the argument or discussion. or you point out various shades of meaning of the word to try and like move the argument into absurdity or away from factualness to try to, you know, destroy it. So what's an example? This is and the way to avoid equivocation in discussions is to agree on definitions before you start, and it's so tiresome, but there's so many words that can be taken so many ways that if you're speaking with someone who you know is going to intentionally probably redefine a word or go into a different aspect of definition of the word in the middle of the conversation, especially when it's like the word is commonly understood to mean this, but it could mean that, and we're going to talk about it like that all of a sudden. Those things are all equivocation. They're all, you know, like it says, exploiting the ambiguity of language, because words can mean so many different things all of the time. But it's nice when you can talk to someone who's like understands that we all know what we mean most of the time. We don't have to argue about the meaning of words, and we don't have to like stop to redefine it for an SJW talking point or a point of, you know, what's the word when you pretend like you're being attacked all the time? Victimization. For victimization points or whatever. But it's nice when you're talking to someone who doesn't have to do that all of the time, but if you do, it helps to find the definition that you want to agree on and then have the discussion, because no matter which way you define it, you're still going to be able to make your points. You just have to know how to basically get around the asshole who wants to equivocate all of the time. So the example here that they have is the queen told the curious little crane that she could have jam every other day, but never today, since today was not any other day. It's just, it's like it's clever. Every time someone does it, it can be clever, but it's never accurate or helpful, and it's annoying. I'm trying to think of a good example recently. You might be able to apply this to the whole virus discussion, like whether or not something is a virus or not, because now I feel like every time I say like, yeah, this like viral infection, people are like, well, actually viruses aren't real. And it's like, well, okay. So we have to like redefine the thing that I'm talking about, because the thing I'm talking about is still real. There's still something that makes people sick, and it does often seem to be transmissible. So what word would you like to use for that? Whatever that word is, that's what we're talking. So that could be a really small example of it. That doesn't, I don't know how much that one counts, because that's more like people are trying to make each other aware of a certain new area of understanding that you might want to look into, which is actually helpful, but oh, good call. Far right and alt right, or just any right and like alt right now, or radical right. That is a good example of equivocation. If you're like, oh, here's this rally of people who are, you know, on the right, and they would like their, you know, gun rights, for example, and people are like, oh, these radical right terrorists are taking over the Capitol for their whatever rally. And you're like, that is equivocation. That is not logically accurate. It is fallacious. I wonder if you could hear the fizz from my kombucha as I just poured it right now. Oh my goodness. I wish I had a better example. I'm sure there's some really good ones. But you guys get the picture. We've got the false dilemma. This is also known as the false, what do they call it? Shoot. Dichotomy. False dichotomy, I think, is the other name of this. And the idea is that someone gives you two options, and there's actually 3 or 4 or infinite options, but they limit it. And this is the most common method of a, what do I want to say, like an authority figure to convince you to agree to be controlled. So I use this in the classroom all the time. I'm not going to lie. I'm not even ashamed. It's an unnatural situation in a classroom, and if it wasn't, I wouldn't use things like this to manipulate my kids. But since it is such a false construction, and it is nearly impossible to be absolutely morally and ethically correct and still run anything resembling a classroom that is calm, I did use this all of the time. And so an example is I would, someone would misbehave, and I would say, well, you can either go sit in the hall and write me a letter about what you did, or you can stop what you're doing and remain in class and just not do it anymore. And that is a false dilemma. And if they were smart enough, and many of them were actually, every once in a while we'd get some, to point out like, or I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do this, then you're like, shit, that didn't work. But government does this all of the time, right? Like they're like, well, you can either stay in your house or we can have millions more people die. And you're like, what about the places where they didn't stay in their house and not millions of people died? And they're like, nope, you could stay in your house or else people die. You can wear your mask or people die. You can get your vaccine or people die. They're constantly giving us false dilemmas. You will see them everywhere. If you haven't yet been looking for them, you will notice them every single day. I'll have their example here with the cute little foxy guy. He says, which part of the avocado would you like to try? I want to try the middle bit, said the buyer, which seems to be missing. You can only try the other parts. So keep in mind that there's often infinite possibilities to anything, and the false dilemma presents you with just one or two or a few. The black or white fallacy. Thank you, Chris. False binary. Yeah. False duality. It's bullshit. It's really effective bullshit. Very, very effective. As soon as someone gives you, you have this or this, you're like in there with them. You're like, oh, I have this or this. And you stop considering the outside of that. Not everyone, but a lot of people. It's a very simple bit of psychology. So it's a good one. Not a cause for a cause. This is a cool one. This is the fallacy that it's kind of like the false causation. You know, correlation isn't causation, basically. Correlation does not equal causation. Yeah, I said that right. So their example is that this little beaver guy walks up to the mountain just before dawn every day, and he asks the sun to come out, and the sun always does. So him climbing up and asking the sun to come out is what caused the sun to come out. That's a fallacious reasoning. I like this example here. We often hear this from the fundamentalists. The recent earthquake was due to people disobeying the king, or the recent earthquake was due to like the gay pride parade and God hates fags and whatever. That stuff is not a cause for a cause as well. Trying to think if we see this recently. Yeah, I mean, I guess we do. That people are getting sick from this coronavirus and dying, and they're saying, you know, it's because people aren't following their directions and staying home and wearing their masks and rubbing enough disinfectant all over their bodies every night or whatever we're supposed to be, whatever ritual we're supposed to be doing. I guess that could be. We definitely see it in the argument for vaccines. We say, well, look, they gave all these people these vaccines in this 1 year, and then people stopped getting sick with that, and then we ignore that we also introduced, you know, indoor plumbing that year and got rid of some toxic waste plants that were like spewing into people's water sources, and that also people still did get sick with that, but we renamed it something else, which goes back to equivocation. We ignore all of that because we think correlation equals causation, except even the people who think it doesn't and realize that it's a logical fallacy, they'll still go back to that, especially that one, and they'll be like, no, that time it actually is causation. You're like, okay, I guess you're only logical when it like suits your needs. Oh, I like, this is one that I can apply to something that we might be familiar with. People have been you know, showing that Dean Koontz novel that showed that Wuhan had like a viral outbreak and spread a disease, and they're saying therefore he knew, or he's in the Illuminati or whatever, because then it happened. And I like to point out, like, that's possible. That is one possible thing that we cannot discount, but it is also not a cause for a cause. Possibly he was divinely inspired to psychically write about something that would happen in the future. Much more likely he chose one of very few biological, you know, viral, whatever they're called, containment places. I'm not thinking of the right words. And used that as a plot point in his book. It's not that outlandish to think that someone in the 80 whatever, you know, not having access to the internet would have only known of a few and would have picked one that fit his plot. So you just have to keep it in mind. Just because something seems related to something else does not mean that it is related at all. In fact, it's more often probably not. You have to have a lot more evidence than that. to rely on it. And none of these are saying, again, it doesn't mean that maybe Beaver walked up and asked the sun to come out and that is the reason the sun came out. That could be too. Like, we don't have to discount it just because correlation doesn't equal causation, just because it's not a cause for a cause. It could be true. We should be open to that. We should just know for ourselves, and for anyone claiming that that is true, that like, well, it might be true, but it might not be true. We just have to remember all of these fallacious logical claims that we're going through, they all could be supporting whatever claim they're making, could be supported and could be true. It's just not necessarily true, and it's probably not, given that they're not looking at the right evidence. Hopefully I said that right. What's up, Chris Phoenix in the chat? Nice to see you. So that's not a cause for a cause. We also have appeal to fear. Good God. This one should be so, like, we should teach this to every child so they can stop being controlled by this shit. It's crazy. It works way too well, as we have seen with all of the insanity that is going on today. So the appeal to fear obviously plays on people's fears, and it asks you to imagine a terrifying future, and then to dissuade you or persuade you, depending on which way they want you to go, to avoid that terrifying future. So one example they have here is, I ask all employees to vote for my chosen candidate in the upcoming elections. If the other candidate wins, he will raise taxes and many of you will lose your jobs. So that's an appeal to fear. It works way too well. People vote for that exact type of reason all of the time. It'd be nice if they didn't, but in their example here with Mr. Froggo, it says, Mr. Frog lost the election after Mr. Donkey convinced everyone that Mr. Frog became the school dean. Soon enough, the entire university would be run by frogs. Don't let him become the school dean. If you do, the whole university will become frog-like. I mean, honestly, I don't know if there's a single politician or media story. Every single story, I imagine, probably has an appeal to fear in it, somewhere in it. It's like maybe the most saturated logical fallacy that we can see. It's probably literally everywhere. I would challenge us to find something without an appeal to fear in it. I actually was surprised by reading Rand Paul, the older one. He had an article on looking at the statistics of, COVID infections and spread and all of this, and it was very logical. It was very factual, and it had, as far as I could tell, no emotion or logical fallacy in it at all. So maybe there are some. It's pretty rare, especially with anything political or social, to not have an appeal to fear. We are just so easily controlled by fear. It's horrifying. Right. Wear a mask or you'll kill all the old folks. Wear a mask or everyone will die. Stay in your home or everyone will die. If you don't do this, like, the whole world's gonna die. It's just crazy. And then everybody did it. And everybody is still yelling at each other for it. You're just killing people! Like, I'm literally not. Like, you need to calm down. Ron is the dad, Rand is the son. Oh, okay, thank you. So Ron Paul wrote the article. Really good article. If you haven't looked at it, it's a great piece. I mean, there's a fallacy in here that talks about exactly not doing the thing I'm about to say, but some people discount it just because they don't like him for some reason, and so they wouldn't even read it. But if they would, it's a very persuasive piece because it is factual and not full of logical fallacies. A hasty generalization. Jesus, this one also got us with this whole COVID thing. This is a huge part of the problem. This logical fallacy is that you have very little data to go off of and you jump to a conclusion based on that data. That's the hasty generalization. You haven't seen enough, but you still come to a result and you call it fact, you call it true, you present it as true. That is a hasty generalization. Often we see this in science if they have too small of a sampling size, or even if they have too uniform of a sampling size, depending on what you're looking at. You know, if like some of these polls that you see, they'll be like 80% of people think that we should all stay at home and die instead of going out and dying or whatever. Then you look at like the population they polled and they're all, 50 and above or something, and it's like, I think it actually was the opposite, but anyway. And you're like, okay, well then really what you should say is white people in the northeastern region of the United States who are 50 and above say that 80% rate that we shouldn't go at or whatever. So the hasty generalization comes in a lot. The hasty generalization came in when we said, some people might have been helped by ventilators, so therefore we should take every single patient we get and we should stick them on a ventilator right away. And now people are dying from being ventilated when they didn't maybe need it. 80% of people who go on the ventilator are dying. You'd think that we would try something else. And ventilators are supposed to be, for a last case scenario. Like literally the person will just die soon anyway, so let's try this. But instead they're doing it right when they're admitting people, which is terrifying. Makes me think I'm not going to go to a hospital ever again. But that was based on a hasty generalization as far as I'm concerned. And it's perhaps even with the hydroxychloroquine thing. Maybe that's a hasty generalization. Maybe it helped a few people and then we started using it and then it doesn't help. I don't know because we don't have enough data. So we shouldn't make hasty generalizations. We should find out, what's true based on good data that is reproducible and that we see enough data to make those opinions. Ron Paul was never president. That'd be cool if he could be. It's sad that everyone's so dumb. If you don't get a vaccine, I won't be vaccinated. Yeah, what is that? Is that the last one we did? Yeah, appeal to fear. It's like, my vaccine doesn't work unless you get yours somehow. I'm scared that I'm going to get sick even though I already got my vaccine, so you should get your vaccine. Which is crazy. Just catching up with the chat. 40,000 for each patient on a ventilator. Yeah, I heard 30,000. I don't really know what the number is, but if there's any thousands that they get more for putting people on ventilators, now you have an economic incentive to do it, even if it might not be the best choice. I don't want to come down too hard on doctors and nurses who are maybe doing this, because I also understand that there's guidelines that are put out, and that if they don't follow those guidelines and then someone dies, then they can get sued. But I'd like them to remember that there may be sanity that returns to people in the future, I can only hope, and that maybe they might be held accountable for putting people on ventilators who didn't necessarily need it and it was way too soon. And that money incentive definitely doesn't help people make very good choices about things like that. So that is concerning. I also know that they have been asked to basically attribute every death that could even be assumed to possibly maybe be COVID related as a COVID death, and that they get money for each death certificate that they have that has that as the reason for death. So that's a piece of bullshit that makes no sense as well. So there's a lot of economic incentives involved that are very strange, and I feel sorry for anybody in the medical field right now who has to try and navigate these waters, because I would just quit. I would just not participate, because it sounds like a fucking shit show, and you're being asked to ignore your senses and data and do things that don't make sense instead, which is killing people. And so you're killing people. And yeah, again, I understand how this all kind of can come about, but I just would hope that people's hearts and minds wake up in the moment and they stop participating in the craziness. And we've seen a lot of people come out and sort of whistleblow and point out all this bullshit that's going on. So that's really hopeful. We need people like that to do that. And then their friends and relatives will look and say, like, what's going on? But yeah, so that's hasty generalization. Too small of a sample size, or too little experience, or too little understanding, and still making assumptions and conclusions anyways. We see kids do this all the time. It's a very normal behavior to try to take the information you have and understand it and make conclusions about it. So it's not like evil or bad or whatever. It's just when it's misused intentionally, when it gets hairy. And when I was a kid, I was trying to figure math out, and I was like 5 or something, or however old you are when you start learning math, I don't know. And I was like, okay, I get it. 1 + 1 = 2. So 2 + 2 = 3, and 3 + 3 = 4, because I thought I had found the pattern, and they had, to explain to me that wasn't how it worked. That was a hasty generalization. we have this appeal to ignorance. We see this all the time. This is probably the one that I'm the most guilty of. I don't know. I'm not sure. That'd be interesting to do like a self-analysis of logical fallacy, but appeal to ignorance is basically saying we don't have evidence and therefore it's not real. So we have no evidence that there are pink unicorns, so there are no pink unicorns. That is not true. It's just not true. You can say instead, we have no evidence for pink unicorns, and so there's probably not pink unicorns, and that would be true. That would be very true. But you cannot say there are not. So UFOs is a good example, which is what they use here. This is what Carl Sagan said. And Carl Sagan, you know, he's a smart guy, but he still did it. There's no compelling evidence that UFOs are not visiting the Earth, therefore UFOs exist. Interesting. I thought it was going to go the other way. There's no compelling evidence that UFOs don't exist, and therefore they do exist. You could go either way with it, though, because there's really no compelling proof either way, or evidence. But yes, like I said, you can say what is likely or less likely, and you can say it's probably this, it's probably that, it seems like this, all of those things, which are phrases that I like to employ most of the time, because things that you say suddenly become more true when you do that, and more accurate. You can do those things. You just can't say, we don't know, therefore I know, right? There's no evidence, therefore I know that it's not true. That doesn't make any sense. And that's the whole point. None of these make any sense. That's why we study them, because people use them all the time, despite that they don't make sense. In their little drawing here, we have our two little bunny guys. And they're looking at this thing in the sky, and they say, look, it's a strange beam of light moving through the sky. I don't know what it is, so it must be aliens visiting us from another planet. Too true. A lot of people ignore that we don't have any idea what these things are. There was that thing that just came out where it's like, you know, the Navy released like another UFO video or something, and I'm like, so? Like, are we supposed to care still? Like, you can go outside and see weird ass shit on your own any day of the night, any day of the week at night, you know, and it'll be the same as watching that video. Like, you still won't know what the fuck that is, and it still won't matter. All you can say is there's something in the sky that's weird. Who knows what it is, you know? And even when I did my aliens talk on whatever that was, the last episode Sunday, I was very sure to point out, like, I don't know for sure, but here's my best guesses and my, you know, based on the data that I have and my experiences. Because otherwise, you can't say for sure. I don't know what that is. And even if you have a video of some random thing in the sky, like, there's nothing to say that isn't human technology. There's nothing to say you didn't make it yesterday on a, you know, fucking computer, because we have such good graphics now, and they're all shitty, blurry videos anyway. And it's just, it could be anything. I don't know why it would matter anymore to anyone what it is, or, you know. Maybe I'm jaded. But that was appeal to ignorance. Just because you don't know doesn't mean that you can know, which should make perfect sense, but we do it all the time anyway. This one is interesting. We've got the no true Scotsman fallacy. And this is when we categorize things and we say, well, this thing can't be that thing because this category is like that, and that thing's in this category, so it's not like that, right? And it's kind of like, what am I trying to say? Okay, I'll just go with their examples because I'm blanking. But like this example here, programmers, there's an idea that programmers might not have very many social skills. So someone comes along and says, but John is a programmer and he is not socially awkward at all. They're trying to disprove the fallacy that the other person made by pointing out a really good point. And then the person might say, yeah, but he's not like a real programmer, right? So you're like, oh, like, I mean, geeks are all like this. And you're like, yeah, but that geek is like that. And like, oh, well, they're not really a geek or whatever. It's basically like, it's a lot like equivocation, because you're changing the definition and the meaning of something sort of mid-conversation. And it really only comes in when you're making broad statements about a group anyway, which are already fallacious. So it's kind of like a fallacy to match another fallacy. It's kind of boring. So we'll move on. Unless you have a really good example in the group over here. I love it. That was a COVID drone, not a UFO. So yeah, don't redefine things in little conversations, and you'll never have the no true Scotsman fallacy. Or don't make generalizations about groups, and then you won't have to do the no true Scotsman fallacy either. Only vaccinated people can purchase goods. I don't know if that would fit here. Only vaccinated people can purchase goods. And then you say, yeah, but he's purchasing goods and he's not vaccinated. And then the person say like, oh yeah, but he's not really. You'd either have to say, oh, he's not really purchasing goods, or oh, he's not really not vaccinated. So you could use that here. Yeah, that one always bothers me because it just seems like an equivocation to me, but in like a specific situation. Anyways, let's move on. Genetic fallacy is cool as well. The genetic fallacy, is this the one that I said we would get to later? I'm not sure. But the genetic fallacy, yeah, it is. This is the Ron Paul one. So the genetic fallacy would be like, that article's stupid because Ron Paul wrote it and Ron Paul is dumb or whatever. You're like, okay, but that doesn't mean anything about the article, right? You could still even think Ron Paul is dumb and read the article and still get something out of it. But the genetic fallacy is when people try to use that, where it came from or who said it, in order to discredit it. So this happens a lot. Like, I'll use quotes sometimes from people that other people don't like very well. I can't think of a good example right now, but let's just say that you were going to use a quote from Hitler. Hitler probably said a bunch of shit that was true and awesome. You know? Like, everybody evil and bad has, like, good, normal parts of themselves, and everybody good and true and wonderful has, like, negative things that happen too. It's not all or nothing, right? So let's say you shared a quote by Hitler and someone was like, yeah, but that's a quote from Hitler, so it's dumb. Like, it doesn't make sense to discount the content and the quality of something or the character of something because of where it came from. And it does happen a lot, and it is unfortunate. You know, their example here is the little doggies are talking to the queen pug. And they say, with all due respect, your highness, how can we entertain the ideas of a dog who developed his ideas while on the street? It came from this street dog. It can't be true. It's almost like the appeal to irrelevant authority, but backwards. You're trying to, like, diss the person or the place where it's coming from and impugn the evidence or ideas or whatever it is because of that. And it is bullshit. Right? Chris Phoenix, you are not on ignore. I'm a genius, but my parents were alcoholics. Well, yeah, I mean, if somebody were like, yeah, but Chad said that and his parents are alcoholics, so that's bullshit. That would be a genetic fallacy. It happens a lot. It's really unfortunate that people will discount content and information because of where it comes from. And we do it in our community too a lot, I think, because unfortunately some people are like, oh, but that came from the mainstream media, so it's bullshit. That's a genetic fallacy as well. Their mainstream media is perfectly capable of producing content that is great, although it doesn't usually. And it's also perfectly capable of having, like, nuggets within all of the bullshit that are good nuggets of information to get. And so to discount all of it as bad because it came from the mainstream is genetic fallacy. So I like to try to be aware of, especially the ways that I might use these, or, you know, people around me or my community might use these. And that is one way that is, it's kind of disappointing, because we, I think, as critical thinkers, should be kind of the best at not using genetic or logical fallacies in what we do and how we think about things. And we're all practicing. Like I said, I do them, you do them. Even if you study them, you're going to keep doing them. It's like it's hard not to use some of these sometimes, but what's good is when you try to see them more and more, especially in yourself, and especially in the information you are consuming, and try to cut them out. Then your example is a shining, example to other people. And you're going to have a better organized mind and information system. Yes, that's a good example too. Trump said that hydroxychloroquine may cure COVID, and so now we can't use chloroquine because it came from Trump. That is a very good example of a genetic fallacy. And basically anything that comes from Trump, right? If Trump said it, can't be true, can't be right, can't be good. I'm like, dude, the dude has done some good shit, but no one can see it because genetic fallacy. No, yeah, the news is not here to bring us truth about the world. They're definitely not. That's not at all. And I hope I didn't imply that. But it would be silly to assume that therefore everything that came from them was not true or worth anything. There's definitely nuggets everywhere of gold that we can find. So genetic fallacy, we see it all the time. We have guilt by association. This is one that most people are really familiar with. We hear this term a lot. When you were a kid, you probably experienced it. You're like, got a new friend, and then all of a sudden everyone was like, oh, you're like bad now because of that person you're hanging out with. And you're like, huh? Like, I didn't even change. What's wrong with people? But that's guilt by association. If they have determined that something or someone is bad and you are associating with it, whatever it is, then you have now become bad in their mind, and that is logical fallacy. It's pretty obvious. All of these are kind of, when you think about them, you're like, well, duh, of course that's not true, but that doesn't stop people from using them. And they'll use them even as though they are fact. And even if you point out the logical fallacy, they'll be like, yeah, but it's still true. You're like, maybe it is. It could be true, but it might not be, and you should be aware that it is not logical. The whole point is to see what's not logical, even if it is true or false, right? That is the point. It gets hard when you can see something that is true and is also illogical, right? That's harder to sort of sift through. But yeah, I don't know if there is more that we need to cover on that one. We'll just say they're examples. My opponent is calling for a healthcare system that would resemble that of socialist countries. Clearly, that would be unacceptable. It is silly to discount something just because it might look similar to another thing, or might be related to a thing, or might have some sort of association with a thing. Their example with Mr. Donkey pointing at the angry bulldog man, dictator guy, who's on a poster, and the poster says, "A prosperous dictatorship is an educated dictatorship." And the donkey man says, "My opponent believes that we should spend more on education. Do you know who else thinks that? The dictator himself." So you can see it might be actually a good idea. Just because someone bad did it doesn't make it bad. It is not bad just because of what it is related to. Affirming the consequent is, it sounds very complicated, but it's not. When you break it down, you will see. I guess it's also known as modus ponens, but I don't know that those words. But I guess that means the mode of affirming by affirming. And it's kind of like circular logic, I believe. So it's in the form of, if A equals C, so if A equals C, A, and then C. Okay, so if A, I'm going to stop doing it in a mathematical format, and I'm just going to say that it's like saying, Lindsay and Susie are both girls. Lindsay is a teacher, therefore Susie is a teacher. It's like, just because some two things have some similarity and you've established that doesn't make all of their qualities the same as each other, shared with each other. Which, again, seems pretty obvious when you break it down, and yet people still do it. So here is their example of how someone might do it. If water is boiling at sea level, then its temperature is at least 100 degrees Celsius. This glass of water is boiling at sea level, hence its temperature is at least 100 degrees Celsius. Wait, but that's actually true. Oh, they were showing us the truth. Sorry, you're like watching me like get through this on air, but they were showing us a true one, and then that false one is the one I already said. Like, Susie and Lindsay are not both teachers just because they're both girls. For example, what they just said was true. So if water is boiling at sea level, then it is at least 100 degrees Celsius. This glass of water is boiling, so it is 100 degrees Celsius at least. That's true, but you can't say, therefore, for example, this glass of water is 100 degrees Celsius, and therefore we're at sea level, right? It's like that. You can't go the other direction. So you can't assume that because the consequence is true, that when the consequence is true, the precedent is true. I don't know how many more ways I can say it, but hopefully one of them has been clear to you. But here's their other example. The picture always helps if the rest was unclear. But we've got two little raccoon guys in knight armor, and one guy says, "Knights wear armor, stranger, and yet you are wearing armor and are not a knight." And the little guy says, "Well, guard, not everyone who wears armor has to be a knight." That's true. Not all who wander are lost, right? Just because the lost wander doesn't mean that the wandering are lost. So that's affirming the consequent. It's fallacious. We have the appeal to hypocrisy. I hate this one. When I'm in a fight with somebody, this happens. We all do it to each other, I think. I'm sure you've experienced this. But the appeal to hypocrisy is like, these two little bear kids are fighting. One says, "Why did you eat my porridge? Why do you keep eating my porridge?" And the other one says, "How about I start listing all of your bad habits?" And we all have done this, where you're like, "Hey, why did you do this to me?" And they're like, "Well, what about that one time you did that one thing?" And you're like, "That we're not talking about that. We're talking about this right now." It's constant. It's almost they want to revert to this, so it makes sense. You know, you want to take the blame and the pressure off you and show the other person like they're also fallible, and it makes sense psychologically why we would do that, but it is not logical to do so. It doesn't make sense given what you're supposedly talking about with a person and what you're supposedly trying to like suss out the answer to. It doesn't make sense to sort of jump to some other unrelated, often, error in the person's past, especially. Let's see if they have another example. "This man is wrong because he has no integrity. Just ask him why he was fired from his last job." And then the person replies, "Well, how about we talk about the fat bonus you took home last year despite half of your company being downsized?" So you're just, you're displacing the blame, right? You have something that you actually should probably answer for and directly address, and that would be logical. And instead you're like, "Well, what about you?" Yeah, so that's annoying. It's annoying. I try very hard not to appeal to hypocrisy too. I really hate it. It's just so messy because now you have two things to talk about. You're like, okay, now we have to talk about the thing you brought up and then also get back to the other thing. And it's like, why don't we just deal with the one thing? That'd be way easier. And if we want to deal with the other thing, let's deal with that too, but let's do it separately. Keep things clear. Know what I'm saying? We've got the slippery slope argument. It's hard because there are slippery slopes, and we do want to point out a slippery slope when we see it and be like, "Watch out, that slope might be slippery." But it also is not a reason to determine the veracity of a claim or to understand whether or not something actually is or is not a given characteristic. And that's the part that we want to pay attention to. Just like affirming the consequent tells us, just because you're pointing out a slippery slope doesn't mean you're making a logical fallacy or a fallacious claim, but slippery slope can be a logical fallacy. So if that's not confusing, I don't know what is, but it's true. So it attempts to discredit a proposition by arguing that its acceptance will undoubtedly lead to a sequence of events, one or more of which are undesirable. So it kind of combines appeal to fear with a sort of assumed string of consequences that are not proven. And that's the essential aspects of a slippery slope fallacy. A lot of these, and this is part of where my students are genius and they would point it out, they'd be like, "Well, is it a slippery slope or an appeal to fear?" And you're like, "No, maybe it's both. Could be both." One example they have... the part of the fallacy too is that they assume that these transitions or these steps that they're going to point at are inevitable. And I always try to point this out myself with this assumed inevitability of various things that we don't know are inevitable or not, especially in regards to, for example, the proliferation of electronics or AI, or people think it's inevitable that we're going to get a vaccine for this cold virus that we've never made a vaccine for a cold virus before, but they think it's inevitable that we will. That's a logical fallacy. But here's an example. of a slippery slope argument. We shouldn't allow people uncontrolled access to the internet. The next thing you know, they'll be frequenting pornographic websites, and soon enough our entire moral fabric will disintegrate, and we will be reduced to animals just from giving people uncontrolled access to the internet. So that is a slippery slope fallacy. It is commonly used in politics in order to pass laws and legislation that controls our behaviors. So they say, well, if we don't stop them here, then it's going to go there, and then there, and then there, and then in the end, we're all going to die. So it does definitely use the appeal to fear. It's embedded within there. Chad Clemens has a good example. The Unabomber teaches us that conspiracy people all go nuts, right? If you give a person a conspiracy, then they're just going to go crazy until they kill everyone. Like, that's a good example of a slippery slope. I like that gif of the cat hitting the bong. That's funny. All right. And the image here is, you know, big guy cat and little tiny guy cat and a tiny turtle. And the big guy cat says, if you let a bully come in your front yard, he'll be on your porch the next day, and the day after that, he will eat your babies. And the turtle says, well, that escalated quickly. Anytime you can say that escalated quickly, maybe it was a slippery slope. You'll have to check. Every time I hear eat your babies, I think of this John Kerry fake video that was viral on the internet before we knew what viral meant. If anybody's old enough to remember it, I salute you. John Kerry will eat your babies. It also reminds me of the If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. That's a slippery slope book. If you give a mouse a cookie, he'll take everything from you. We have appeal to the bandwagon. We see this all the time. Unfortunately, I just looked at this group of little toucans and saw this as a mask that he was handing his friend. Because that is the appeal to the bandwagon that is going on in my reality right now. Everybody's wearing a mask, so you should too. Everyone's wearing a mask. Why aren't you doing it? Everyone's wearing a mask. It's what's going to save your life. Everyone's wearing a mask. It's like, fuck. I don't care. What you do, you. I'll do me. But it's a pretty obvious one, and you're all very familiar with it, I'm sure. Anytime someone says, you know, everyone thinks this, everyone's doing that, everyone blah, 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 that's a fallacious argument. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. They use it all the time with global climate change. They say, well, all of the scientists, it's unanimous. It's like, and you're like, it's not actually at all unanimous. There's actually plenty of scientists who don't jump on that bandwagon. And even if it were a huge amount of scientists, that still doesn't make it true. It makes it much more likely. It makes it something that we definitely want to pay attention to and look into. It makes it quite possible, right? And so you should look into it. And at the same time, that shouldn't be the reason that you just agree with it, is that everyone is doing it, everyone is saying it, everyone agrees. Those are not reasons. They're descriptions of something happening, but they're not reasons to agree with a statement's factual veracity or not. Yes, the masks are driving me crazy. I hate that I just looked at this picture and saw that as a mask, but it is basically the toucan saying, why don't you want to wear a party hat? Everyone else is wearing one. It's exactly what's happening in society right now. And they bring up the example of Galileo. You know, he faced ridicule from everyone because he didn't support the Copernican model of like the sun, you know, revolving around the earth. And he said, no, actually, we're all revolving around the sun. And that was anti-bandwagon and true. A lot of things that can be not on the bandwagon can be true, and especially in our backwards society where it seems like the majority is always going the wrong way. They point out here, which I think we don't need really pointed out to us, but we may as well point it out anyway, that luring people into accepting that which is popular is a method frequently used in advertising and politics. It is very consistently true. In politics, they're always making claims that relate to the bandwagon, and definitely in advertising, they're implying that if you are not doing this, you are not part of the group, and therefore you suck. Everyone hates you. That is advertising's whole purpose. We've got ad hominem. This is the easiest one to see. I wonder if you guys can hear that horrifying muffler that just passed by that I hate, but it's easiest to see. It's the most often used on Facebook by idiots. and non-idiots alike. It is the easiest, it's the laziest, it's the least thoughtful, and ad hominem is basically when you attack a person instead of their argument. You know, I'm not even going to read the example because it actually makes it less clear, but if I were going to say, you know, like the other day, I was trying to make the point that it seems like in our society you are sort of forced to and expected to respect every single religion, every single possible iteration of it, including Luciferianism and Satanism. You respect it, you allow people to have that, unless it's Christianity, and then you're allowed to bash it. In fact, it's popular to bash it. I wasn't making the claim that I was, you know, oppressed or anything else, and for that I was called an idiot. Like, oh, well, you're an idiot. Like, well, that's not an argument, but it is an ad hominem attack, and it does make the conversation impossible to continue having, because personal attacks have no place in a conversation, basically. And it's just silly and lazy and stupid. It's really disappointing that people resort to it almost all of the time, but that's why I really appreciate the Eyes Open group, because we have a sort of understanding that we don't do rudeness and attack and personal attack because it's logically fallacious and pointless and doesn't help anyone learn anything. And it instantly ignores everything that the person said for like nothing. It's not even related. It's like, I don't know. I just hate it. It's common. You'll see it everywhere. We even see it in politics. They'll be like, you know, well, Donald Trump can't. I mean, he said that. He's an idiot. He's stupid. Why would we like believe that? It's like, well, you didn't even talk about the like veracity of the claim. You didn't even talk about the evidence. You just jumped to like, I don't like this person, and that is silly. So that's ad hominem. Again, the most common one you'll see if you go looking. It's everywhere. Circular reasoning. This is basically when something refers to its own self as evidence for its claim. So it's let's just look at the example. There's the little guy doing some sort of karate practice, and an older sort of wise seal, I don't know if they're seals or what they are, and standing next to him, and he says, "Are you sure that I won't fall to the ground?" And the older man says, "Yes, little one, trust in the book." And the book says, "Sea lion is always right." Oh, I guess they're sea lions. The book, according to Sea Lion. So Sea Lion wrote a book, and the book makes a claim, and so to reinforce his claims, he refers to the book that he wrote. Government refers to itself. Like, well, this is right because we had that other time that we did it, and so then it's cool. Or we made this law before, and so that makes it moral. And like, you know, referring to yourself and your own creations and past as reason to accept the claim that you're making is not logical. Let's see if they have another good example. When you make the same claim twice, it's also circular reasoning. I like that they pointed this out. So in circular reasoning, a conclusion is either blatantly used as a premise, or more often it is reworded to appear as though it is a different proposition, when in fact it is not. For example, saying you're utterly wrong because you're not making any sense, you're actually just saying the same thing twice, right? You're very tall because you're way up there. That doesn't make sense. You're just saying the same thing twice. That's also a type of circular reasoning, because you're referring back to the same exact thing you already just said. Anything that refers back to itself basically is circular reasoning. Let's see if there's another good one. It's not very helpful, the one they have, so we'll just skip that. But yeah, reference to a reference to a reference. It's like when you look up in the dictionary, you look up a word, and then it tells you its definition is itself. It's like, I don't have a word right now in mind to give you, but you'll look up a word every once in a while. It'll be like, you know, convoluting, and it'll be like a convolute. And you're like, well, what the fuck is a convolute? And you go to convolute, it's like convoluting. And you're like, dude, come on. That's circular reasoning as well. It doesn't make any sense. Yes, Chad points out if we're not careful, we're all prone to these wizard tricks. It's absolutely true. The reason why these exist is because they come out of our sort of growth of our ability to reason. They don't make sense, but they're, just like my 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 3. It's like I was just trying to grapple with the world as I saw it and try to make sense of it. And so all of these come from sort of very normal social, psychological settings that we have, so to speak. And that makes sense, even though none of them make sense. They're all things that we therefore probably do and have done and will continue doing if we don't intentionally look for them and weed them out. So you should not feel in any way, stupid or bad for using any of these. You should just notice, like, okay, I get now why that is illogical, and I want to try to stop because it's not helpful. This one is cool. It's kind of similar to the what was that? Sorry, I'm going to jump way back. Affirming the consequent. It's kind of similar to that. And this is the last one we're going to do. So composition and division. It's when you assume that because a part of a whole has a characteristic, therefore the whole has to have that characteristic, or because the whole has a characteristic, every part of it has to have that characteristic. They're both logically fallacious. So we see this a lot in the form of, what's the word that I'm looking for? When you take a whole group, you make a blanket statement about them. Words fail me sometimes. God, it's going to drive me crazy. You know what I'm talking about, though. You're like, oh, all poor people are fat and stupid because some poor people over there are fat and stupid, and therefore, they all are. There's like a pretty loose example of it, but there are some better examples, and they probably have some here. So, if every sheep in a flock has a mother, it does not then follow that the flock has a mother. That's a little bit different from what I was saying. I think I was actually just describing affirming the consequent and not this. If every sheep in a flock has a mother, the flock does not have a mother. Interesting. It's kind of saying that as above, so below isn't true. Maybe. Let me see further. I think this is the one I always have a problem understanding. Here's another example. Each module in the software system has been subjected to a set of unit tests and has passed them all. Therefore, when the modules are integrated, the software system will not violate any of the invariants verified by those unit tests. Okay. So if you have every component of this is why games fail when they release games. You've tested each part of the game, but when you put it all together, there still might be a failure there from it all coming together. I guess that's a weird example of it, though. It's pretty specific. This is maybe the most specific fallacy. So that is composition. That's assuming that because each part of something has a quality, that the whole thing has that quality. Division, conversely, is inferring that a part must have the same attribute because of the whole to which it belongs happens to have that attribute. It's basically what I said when we started. Just saying that just because each part of something has an attribute doesn't mean the whole thing does. For example, our team is unbeatable. Any of our players would be able to take on any player from any other team and outshine him. So that makes sense why that would not make sense. Makes sense why it wouldn't make sense. So that's composition and division. So it's not like what I was saying about the generalization. Thank you. Stereotypes. That's the one I was actually going for, stereotypes. You guys are rad. You guys are my backup brain. Stereotypes would actually be the affirming the consequent, and composition and division is a little bit more specific. It's kind of related, but it's not quite the same. But I can't think of a real life example where this is actually used to convince you of something. But now I really want to. now my challenge in life is to come up with or find an example of composition and division in media or politics so that I can better understand it, because I don't see where anybody would use this. I guess I can see someone saying this thing about the team or whatever. I don't know why that would really come up in social interaction or argument, though. But who knows? Maybe you guys can come up with an example. Leave it in the comments if you do. Or maybe I will find an example and satisfy myself. I like to learn and look into stuff and get better at understanding these things. So that's fun. It's fun for me. But yeah, so that was my crash course, I guess, in logical fallacies. If you're like me, that won't be enough for you to actually, like get better at logical fallacies, because we probably need multiple exposures to something. What's the average? I think they say is four times that you have to be exposed to something before it really starts to sink in. So if you want to be a rock star about it, what I suggest is that you go to that book, the Book of Bad Arguments. It's just because it's so easy to use. It just has the definition, multiple examples, the picture. It's just very learner friendly. And you use that to then go look through various media articles, political speeches, political rhetoric, that's going on right now, and find the examples of them. And you probably had many of them where you're like, oh yeah, I see that, I get that one, that's all the time. But there's probably a few where you're like, what? Like me with composition and division, where you're like, I don't really get it. And those are the ones that are really good to then go practice finding, because we may find, I have always found when I look at them, that especially when I don't understand one, like the composition and division, when I don't get it very well, I'm probably doing it somewhere. And so by studying it, I can then see where I'm doing it and be like, oh, I've totally misunderstood this, thing. And maybe not. Like I keep pointing out, it could still be true, whatever the thing is that you think is true. It just, you may need to find other evidence or other reasoning, to make sure that it's true. So that's important, I think, to do. And as Chad said, let's grow. It's time to grow, right? We can all do this, and get better at reasoning and understanding. It's like I said, it's not only going to help you be clearer in your thinking and your understanding of the world and everything that happens in it, because you'll be able to apply logic in any situation, and you'll be able to see like, that's a manipulative logical fallacy, and I don't want to take part in this. It might be true, but I'm gonna find more evidence. You'll just be able to navigate those types of things better. But also, and I think this is very important, you will be, again, that shining example to others of like, hey, here's how to think about this logically, And you don't do it as like an attack. You don't want to join in the ad hominem, but you just do it as like, hey, like this part of that doesn't really make sense. Is there some other evidence, or is there another way of thinking it? Because thinking of it like that is like not really, correct or whatever. And I think that helps everybody then grow. So the more that all of us practice logical thinking and presenting things logically and, destroying logical fallacies, which was the next step that I would always do in class once we had, played with those enough and identified them and found them and understood them, we would find ways to counter them, so that in real time you're already prepared of like methods of addressing logical fallacies as you encounter them. Which I think all of us should also be ready to do, especially for ourselves, even if it's just internal, but especially if you can do it externally and publicly, sort of, I think, and kindly, without, assault or degradation of another, then it's very helpful for people. So yeah, Gordon Hamill, you made it. Better late than never is right. It's nice to see you. So I want to remind you guys that Thursday, 2 days from tonight at the same time, same place, we will be doing the Bloodlines, Return to the Bloodlines, by exploring the Rockefeller family. We are kind of following the format of Fritz Springmeier's Bloodlines of the Illuminati. We're doing those same families. There's plenty more families that we could look at, and maybe we will when we're done with these, but people have really enjoyed those past Bloodlines episodes that we've done, so we decided that we want to finish that finally. So we're going to try to do that. So we're starting with the Rockefellers again, and jumping back into it. And of course the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds are like kind of the two most recognized names in those groups of families that seem to run the world. And so it'll be pretty interesting to dive into that mess. And it will be Lee Chapman and Claude Furry as always. I think sometimes we have a few other people involved, like I think John Brisson was on one, Michael Long was on one, But Lee and Claude are kind of the people who hold up. They're the pillars of this series, and I'm more of the guide on the side, sort of conduit or whatever. I'm not the massive researcher like they are. They kill it. They're really great. So if you've seen those other episodes, then you know what to expect. It'll be awesome. And I think the last time we did this, I don't know that we really did like visuals or could do visuals that well. So I think we did on one of them, but I think it was like just starting to come into my understanding how to do that. So it might be even better than ever because we might have visuals. So we'll see. It should be fun. And yeah, so I guess I will wrap it up there. I hope that you guys have found some sort of fallacious thinking and reasoning in your own minds, and I hope you've been able to see how it is misused intentionally often, and sometimes accidentally, often accidentally too, but misused to manipulate you into thinking things that are not necessarily logical. I hope that you focus on and remember that just because a logical fallacy is used does not mean that the premise is false. It just means that you need more evidence to continue supporting that premise. And I definitely know that you are all rock stars and that you're capable of applying the best logic in all that you do in ways that will inspire others around you to also think more clearly. And so until everything that you ever utter and think is perfectly logical in every way, may you travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
It's a one-on-one lesson, so do your homework. Make your dome hurt while up on earth. My bones are blessed from holy dirt. Vibes manifested to words that told me search for verbs and adjectives to describe birth. Worth more than one can speak, while the tongue beats a weak, a sour taste in your mouth, bittersweet. Words can also kill you when you sleep. Mind condition, low frequencies while the subconscious mind listens. I can television filled with lies disguised as truth, and spread it like the word to the youth. Watch the tube. A place where the God gets booed is sorcery. To recreate the God forgery does more than meets the eye. Not too many know. Just hear me flow like the eye of Horus Henio. Yeah, not ready to leave until we believe we're free to go. You hear me, yo?
Sculpted from the ether, the material will eat ya. Stuck on this plane, lanes use jet fuel to greet ya. The dimensional three ain't meeting me on top of the fourth. Didn't climb Jacob's ladder to squab with a sword. Forged with Yggdrasil, branch down, try quiet your lamps now. Ascension past the matter, that they slam out they damn mouths. We ain't on land now, but they over understand. Sacrificing wisdom, hoarding dumber, kosher, wicked hands. Putting faith in worthless worship of the mortals. Artificial portals, mass ingestion of the black goo. Bioengineered morsels, conversing with machine elves. Bypassing maggots, they stuck on Android screens. Now I'm scrolling emerald tablets. Moloch living lavish, off the backs of the savage. Them clasped hands at the Sabbath. Smack of energy damage, they done twisted the tongues with nanotech in the lungs. The awakening's begun, all they really can do is fucking
run.